And government wants to borrow some more. And then Kenyans now are looking at it and say, if they keep borrowing, who's going to pay for it? It'll probably be us. Taxes have already gone up since the tax holiday ended in December because of we were given tax holiday because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now we've gone back to the original taxes that we were paying. And now there's high fuel prices. On top of that, we have COVID-19 and the restriction on how it's affecting people and they're able to earn. And then now there's that added burden of being unable to make money. And then now Kenyans are eyeing that IMF loan with suspicious because they're saying, one, it will result in more taxation. It will result in more corruption. And going forward, I think the leaders who are planning to run for elections in 2022 need to look at what Kenyans are saying about our state coffers and how they're being handled. That's number one. Number two, the 255 billion. It is in fact what we are calling a facility that is meant to give confidence to investors to buy Kenya bonds. Okay, so let's not even talk about the debt yet, and people are already complaining about the debt. We are now in a position where we have to borrow to be able to meet our recurrent expenditure. I was looking at the numbers. 1.950 trillion is our recurrent expenditure. Our revenue is 1.45 trillion. So 500 billion shortfall in recurrent expenditure currently. So before you can even talk about the development budget, which is what our deficit is supposed to be used for, we still have 500 billion shortfall in recurrent expenditure. That's why this IMF will hurt us too. Because remember, after 90 days, we have to be assessed to check whether the government is meeting or implementing all the conditionalities that had been set before being given this money by IMF. So we are not off the hook yet. And then the whole issue of taxes. Gashu, I'm sure you're going to talk about this. We keep saying we are not collecting our target. We are not meeting our targets. I think there was a report that came out the past few weeks and we were questioning it, saying that we've actually raised more than we expected. That's total.
It was for the last quarter.
But yes. Cumulatively,
we are still running behind what we were expected to have raised. So these challenges are there, and I see where the suspicion is coming from Kenyans because of past experience. 2 billion shillings, the president told us one day that we lose 2 billion shillings daily to corruption. I was sitting here thinking how many oxygen plants the 2 billion shillings would be able to build. Yesterday we were told it costs about, 50 to 100 million to build an oxygen plant. If you're told 2 billion is lost every day, that's where the suspicion comes from, because Kenyans are tired and they're hungry. Yeah.
Linus.
Joe, as a country, we have come full circle. We are back to the mid-90s, late 90s. This is the irony of this whole thing. If you read the conditionalities that IMF is giving the Uhuru Kenyatta administration, they're exactly the same conditionalities they gave President Daniel Arap Moi in 1997 and 1999. In 1999, when we were much younger reporters, Joe, we covered President Moi dissolving his cabinet, actually conducting a major cabinet reshuffle, and bringing in Dr. Richard Leakey as head of public service.
The dream team.
The dream team. And bringing in Martin Oduor as finance PS. Bringing in Titus Naikuni as transport PS. Quite a number of people from private sector whose brief was bring the government, bring the public wage bill down.
And you probably want to mention also the establishment of CASA, the Kenya Anti-Corruption Authority, 2 years earlier, which was also part of those things as part of enhancing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, it looks like a kindergarten assignment for the government. Do this and I'll give you your cookies. Do this and you'll get your break time. It is a shame. This is 2021. Moi was mocked a lot. I remember Kiraitu Murungi was saying when Moi was retiring, sit, herd goats,
and watch
how we govern. Now, I want to come to the specifics of this IMF situation we find ourselves in right now. The Uhuru Kenyatta administration is being required, just like the Moi administration, to cut down on public wage bill. The Uhuru Kenyatta administration, just like the Moi administration, is being asked to relook some of the public companies like Kenya Electricity Company.
Yeah, the state-owned enterprises.
The state, yes.
State-owned.
We are going to look at that. And then there's something very school-like. Have a common payroll system across ministries. Like, put an efficient system in place. I remember in the Moi years we had ghost workers. I'm sure they have since tripled. So this is the irony of the whole thing. We have walked full cycle, and in fact, this is an embarrassing moment. And how does it come about? It comes about because IMF and World Bank loans are relatively cheaper than these other loans that are available. But they come with conditions. Conditions that a lot of Kenyans who are used to this culture of accountability had missed. Because China doesn't ask questions. When you want a loan to construct SGR, you construct. If you're going to steal half of that, nobody will ask you questions.
The only challenge is that that loan is more expensive.
It's more expensive. So how you use it, is up to you. Yeah. But World Bank, IMF will come and say, show me where you're putting the money. But in the meantime, can you do the following? So this is a moment of embarrassment. Let me place now where the protests are coming from. Just like in the Moi years, the questions that are being raised were about the efficiency of the government, the corruption levels at the time. So the trust levels of a lender to Francis, whether you can use that money well. Those questions were asked of the Moi administration, and those questions are being asked directly by citizens of the Uhuru Kenyatta administration, because no government in our history has borrowed this much. You know, we are basically borrowing at every turn. Yeah. Every turn. Anything that can be borrowed has been borrowed by this administration. But we have reports about 607 billion shillings lost to corruption. That is 7.8% of our GDP under this administration. KANU did not reach there, and KANU was not very good with figures. It did not reach there when it came to corruption levels. So what we have is a frustrated citizenry, and one really should be sympathetic of the activists that find themselves in police hands today because of what they had to do. There was a court case of mockery of the president with an image which is really, I'm waiting to see how the court goes about that. It's really sad because these same questions that could be asked of KANU in the 90s must be asked of the Jubilee administration in 2021. And it's scoring, honestly, worse than KANU.
And I think obviously that is going to raise interesting questions. The case you talked about, I mean, obviously it's now before the courts, but I mean, there will be interesting questions raised about, you know, the line between all these crimes that have been introduced about computer and all of these things, and people who are actually expressing, you know, their displeasure and you know, protesting against things that are happening in government. And
I think one of the questions, that's being asked is, you know, I think Mutemi has been barred from speaking about the loans of the country altogether. He's a Kenyan taxpayer, surely. Those liabilities fall to him as well. So there's also just questions about freedom of speech. You know, to what extent can the courts limit it? Maybe you can buy him from speaking about this particular issue, but you cannot
or
say,
the president or whatever for that particular.
But honestly,
I mean, the loan is a public thing that everybody's discussing, it seemed a little bit of to put a gag on somebody just.
But I just wanted to touch on the conditions that you had talked about. Really embarrassing that IMF has to point out specific state-owned enterprises that they say are not making money. KQ, Kenya Airports Authority, Kenya Railways, KenGen, KPA, and 3 of the largest public universities, you know, in this country. And you can see these touch on, you know, very important sectors of our economy: education, you know, energy, aviation. Although for KQ, no secret there, they've been making, you know, losses. I mean, COVID cannot even be an excuse with some of those. But, you know, while we're talking about some of those state-owned enterprises, I mean, the examples are numerous. Just this week, we reported that the Privatization Commission for 13 years has only had 2 board members, and they're supposed to have 11. I mean, what is happening in this organization that is supposed to evaluate government entities specifically, such as those ones? I mean, you know, what is wrong with us? Take a look at, for example, in the energy sector, you've got KETRACO, whose work it is to transmit power. You've got Kenya Power, who distribute. So KETRACO is in charge of transmission lines and maintaining them. Kenya Power is in charge of the meters that are in our houses. Then you've got geothermal, the GDC, you've got KenGen. By the way, we have a nuclear energy commission as well. All of these, can be under one, and then all of these are, departments under KenGen, for instance. I mean, take a look at the enterprise funds, for instance. We have the Women Enterprise Fund, we've got the Youth Enterprise Fund, we've got a third one, I think. They're now, there's been a question about mulling them into the Biashara Fund. Please note, with all of these funds, they have staff, they have payroll, they have overheads that are all just not making sense. So I know IMF has looked at 9, but the examples abound across the public sector in this country. It's a shame that we have to have IMF to come in and tell us, by the way, those conditions are interesting. They want a draft blueprint to identify necessary actions and legal reforms to enhance governance by July 2021. By September, they want to see us with an integrated monitoring and reporting system. By the end of September, they want us to have quantified the liabilities from these high-risk state-owned organizations and PPPs. I mean, look, they're running the country.
CBC money.
Yeah, but the irony of this is, I mean, of course, when you talk about funds, the only thing you're not saying is that funds means money. That is actually a synonym. But true. And those ones tend to generate a lot of interest in this country, and they're generally badly managed. But here's the thing. I mean, a lot of these things that they're mentioning, whether it is the universities, whether it is KQ, all of these things, year after year, whether you're talking about the Auditor General, whether you're talking about parliamentary committees, year after year, they document some of the mishappenings in these institutions. So it's not as if the IMF is bringing something and then we go like,
Joe,
what? You mean there's a problem at the University of Nairobi?
Our government would rather listen to IMF than listen to its own Auditor General and its own institutions, simply because they're dangling, the carrot of money. And that is highly
and money that you desperately need. And I will tell you why you desperately need that money, Joe. Look at the Division of Revenue Bill 2021. This is the bill that shows us how the national government and the county governments are going to share the resources. Out of a budget of about 3 trillion shillings, the projected revenue is 1,770 billion, 1.7 trillion or thereabout. How much money is earmarked for public debt financing? 1,170 billion, 1.1 trillion. So you remain with about 600 billion, and you're supposed to give county governments a shareable revenue of 370 billion shillings, plus other conditional grants totaling to taking the whole amount of devolved resources to about 400 billion. So what do you remain with? 200 billion. So what will you use to pay national government workers? Where is money for development? Where is money for key functions like security, defense, foreign affairs, and so on and so forth? So basically it means we will still need to borrow some more. The financial year that we're just about to end, 2020-2021, the public debt servicing was 829 billion shillings out of a projected revenue of about 1.5 trillion shillings, and county governments were to receive 316.5 billion shillings, an amount that they are still complaining. You've heard governors say we haven't had our money. So basically what the long and short of it is, we need to have a serious discussion about the cost of running government, what is necessary, what is unnecessary, because even the amount of money that is being devolved, because the problem is not just at the national level, it's also at the county level. So, let's say, put it this way, up to 30% of the money that we are taking to the county governments is ending in the pockets of a few people. So even as we devolved good things, we also devolved mismanagement and corruption.
I just wanted to add, because I just wanted to follow up on the issue of the counties. In fact, just this week, the county government gave us a status report of what's happening there. They talked about that equitable revenue share. So they say 2 months to the end of the financial year, the counties are yet to receive the 7.2 billion shillings for the counties, 12 counties in December, 26 billion for 47 counties for January, 26 billion for 47 counties in February, 26 billion for 47 counties for March. So this just shows you where we are. I just want to add a quick thing, because in the clip that we played of the president last year, he brought up the issue of Japan, and if you recall, and it's about time we put to rest this comparison between Kenya and Japan. We say, oh, but you know, Kenya's debt is what, 65% of GDP? But look at Japan, they're already at 250% of GDP. This is why you will never compare Kenya to Japan, and I hope we rest this today. 90% of the debt that Japan has is held by Japanese investors. It's local, it's locally held. That means Japan is less vulnerable to external pressure and the conditions that we have just read out now by institutions like the IMF. Japan is also the world's biggest creditor. They have more than $3 trillion in net assets and in foreign currency reserves.
Kuna pesa ya kutosha.
Ya kutosha. Kenya, actually, it's 1.3 trillion in the foreign reserves. It's like having a small loan,
but you kona shamba, sio kimao.
But reserves za kutosha. But Kenya has, as at December last year, $7.75 billion. Japan has 1.3 trillion in foreign reserves. Now let me paint that picture for you. 1,000 billions make a trillion. We are at 7.75 billion. Japan is at 1.3 trillion in foreign reserves.
And I don't
let's not have this discussion about us and Japan.
And their currency is convertible.
Thank
the
you.
yen.
Yes. The yen. It's a safe currency. Global reserve.
Let me share your story. Agashuri was speaking about bills.
We need to go to vaccination.
A quick one, just a small one. You were speaking about bills and Parliament. And in my opinion, I think Parliament has failed in its job to control the borrowing, and because they've approved nearly every request to income or debt that the government has brought to it. The process of even doing the budget. The budget is prepared by the National Treasury and raising the ceiling. The budget prepares the budget is prepared by the National Treasury, and then they get input from citizens and then approved by Parliament. That is how it is. But then the members of Parliament are mandated. They're given the task to check the borrowing by the government. They're supposed to be like watu wa kututetea kule mbele. They're supposed to put the treasury to task. They're supposed to ask questions about where is the money coming from, where is it going. And then of course, because of the new Public Finance Management Act, they're the ones who decide on the debt ceiling. Ni how ambao, who Ibon was telling here that there are talks about pushing the debt ceiling up to 15 trillion. And it will go to Parliament at some point, because now we're talking about 12, but it may go to 15. And they're the same people who are going to approve it and push it to that limit. So how to say, because in my opinion, as I said, I think they failed the people of Kenya.
And the reason they failed, Jamila, is you can't be selectively independent. Dependent on deciding loans, but not independent on vetting, for example, and all that. This Parliament has been an appendage of the executive. They have done the bidding of the executive since 2013 up to now. This the last two parliaments. They have not really lived to the expectation of the Constitution, which makes them a body that should check the executive on spending. We would have had a very robust Parliament asking these questions way before they become they become loans. But one more thing that I just really wanted to quickly add there is borrowing this much and also accepting CBC-like conditionalities from international lenders like IMF and World Bank tells you the same story, Joe, that we covered in the 1997, 98, 99. In 1998, I think Finance Minister was Simon Nyachae, and he made the admission that we are broke. We don't have money. We are broke. And when we see this level of borrowing, there's only one pointer there. We are actually broke, and somebody needs to make that admission, Francis.
Although comparatively, I mean, it is also important to say, look at the number of development projects that are in the country. There are quite a number of them that are ongoing or have been completed. Granted, I mean, you see more roads, electricity connection, and so on and so forth. Basically, you would see, if you compare the country how it is now and how it was, let's say 10, 15 years ago, you will see some more development.
But could those have been spread out over time?
You will see some more development. But now, the question is, quantifying and accounting for the development. That is where I think the critical issue is, because while there's more development, where there are more projects that are ongoing, more that have been lined up, but I think it is important for the government to come out clearly, tell Kenyans, this is what we have done with the money at this cost, so that people now start appreciating why loans are being taken. Otherwise, if this kind of a discussion is not out there, then you leave Kenyans to make certain decisions and have certain perceptions about why we're borrowing, how we are borrowing, and at what cost.
You see, Francis, when corruption and inefficiency grows at the same rate as the development or so-called development we're talking about, then it wipes out the gains. 600 billion lost in a financial year to corruption is a lot of money. It's not the kind of money that was even lost in the 90s.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we really need to talk about the vaccine, because this week we have seen quite some interesting developments, one would say from Russia and back. But let's hear the CS Mutahi Kagwe speaking about the Sputnik vaccine, and by extension all the privately sourced vaccines coming into Kenya.
There will be no licensing of private players in the importation of vaccines, and any such license given will be and is hereby terminated. Any person advertising or vaccinating people for a fee will therefore be in contravention of Pharmacy and Poisons Board regulations governing emergency use authorization and the Public Health Act. As such, they will be liable for prosecution. The only agent for vaccination in Kenya will remain the government of the Republic of Kenya until further notice.
Jamila, it doesn't get more confusing than this. I mean, this Sputnik, for example, because that's the only privately sourced vaccine that we've had in this country, so it shows up in on some ad. I think it was by a hospital in Nyahururu, and then suddenly it is available in town, and then we say, well, we've licensed it, for emergency use authorization. Is that what they call it?
Yeah.
And not for full market authorization and all of those things, and then back and forth, and then suddenly now we're saying actually it shouldn't be here in the first place. There are, at least by government estimates, 527 Kenyans who've gotten it
out of 75,000 doses of the vaccine that had been imported into the country. So of course they said, those who had already received the jab, the 507 something you're talking about, are the only ones who will be allowed to receive now the second jab, because you're supposed to get it after 21 days. Because of course mixing the vaccines is not recommended by WHO, because of course they're different. They work differently in people's bodies, which is fine. But then now there's this thing about the right hand not knowing what the left hand is doing, because the approval was given by PPB. That's why these vaccines were imported. That's why they were being advertised, despite having their only use in emergency and all that being said. But there was approval that was given. Otherwise, how would 75,000 doses of Sputnik 5 arrive in the country? That's well and good. 575 people went and they got injected. Some of them publicly, and we saw pictures of them online. But then now, what we were hearing today, there was a sitting today, I think, with the Senate Health Committee. It was a Parliamentary Health Committee, I forget which one it is. They said now the private company that imported this Sputnik 5 now is seeking to re-export it, the drug. Because one, of course, as we had the minister, they've banned the importation, the distribution, the administration of COVID vaccine by any private enterprise. Of course, they're saying it's for the safety of Kenyans. It's because there's supposed to be processes that have to be followed. You just can't have people being given vaccines, even at home. That example was given, that some were getting the jab in their homes, and all those reasons which were given, which is fine. But then now the question comes up of, are they going to be compensated for this? I was reading somewhere that in South Africa, they actually, the Serum Institute has refunded the South African government for vaccines that they had ordered but which weren't delivered. That's about 500,000 doses which were purchased, but the country decided not to use. That's them. Like, it's clear that yes, this happened, and because this happened, we're going to refund you the money, and it's clearly seen. But here there's a lot of mystery. A lot of mystery in terms of what this vaccine is, because if you look at efficacy, it is said to be about 91-92%. When you look at what we're using, which is AstraZeneca, it's about 79% to 76%. And I'm no expert, but there have been all these issues to do with clotting, whether you should continue using it or not. There was also the confusion that came up during one of the sessions yesterday, when one official said that, oh, someone had died because of taking the vaccine. Then they said, no, they had not died because of that. Someone who had gotten a miscarriage. We're not even sure it was female or male. It was in Uasin Gishu. So it was all very jumbled up to know exactly what happened. That aside, they said about 250-something people had some effects. About 7 or so had adverse effects to the vaccine. As we always say, this is a new process. These vaccines are new. They're developed in a hurry because of the fact that this pandemic is a global pandemic and has affected all of us. And we need the vaccine. Still more research needs to be done. But back to Sputnik 5. We need to be clearer about it. Saying that we have 75,000 doses here. And I said this last week, Kashuri. We are looking at the number of people being given the vaccine going higher. In fact, per current numbers, then people who have gotten the vaccine more, actually the elderly, 58 and above. More of them have been vaccinated as compared to the healthcare workers and the teachers and those who were supposed to have been in phase 1, including those in the security sector. When they opened it up more people went and got the vaccine. That's well and good. Zikiisha, because we already know the delays that are going to be experienced. We are not going to get the second batch when we expected it. In fact, there was the worry that those who had gotten the first dose of AstraZeneca, they're supposed to get it from, I think, sometime end of April, early May. There was the worry, where are we going to get our second one? And the president assured that anyone who got the first dose will get the second one. That's well and good. But, I said it last week, we need to clear the way for more private vaccines to come into the country. Wacha watu wadungwe. We need it. This disease is not going anywhere anytime soon, and at least have a chance of not ending up in the ICU or ending up unable to breathe because you have at least the vaccine in you. Okay? I'm done, I think.
I think for me, overall, be it Sputnik or Oxford AstraZeneca, the one thing I would have liked to see more of, two things. One is clear communication. You know, like you said, first it was emergency use authorization, market authorization, and then you know, was it a male, was it a female who reportedly died? You know, those are things, particularly where we are now. By the time these vaccines were being developed, there was already a lot of sentiment, globally, by the way. You know, anti-vaxxers, people were saying, you know, this is not safe and that sort of thing. Where is the government's COVID vaccine campaign? I would have thought they would be flooding mainstream media, vernacular radio. I would imagine that every video I watch on YouTube is interrupted by an ad from the government saying, this is the vaccine, it is safe for you, these are the centers where you can go get it, this is, you know, these are the documented side effects, you know, from mild all the way to whatever that we have seen, this is where you can report when you get side effects, this is what to expect with it. This is what I would have expected. So what happened was the anti-vaxxers, the hesitancy, the misinformation already had such a huge head start over the government. Do you remember what it was like when COVID first hit? Those ads were on television daily. Several times a day. We knew what to expect. We knew what the symptoms were like. We were told, you know, dial 719. Where is that campaign for this vaccination exercise? And so what's happening is some of the numbers that you're seeing, for example, from the counties, you know, they reported that in the 41 counties outside of the 5, I don't like to call them disease, that one, that they've administered 341,000 doses, 341,520. Would you believe it? The number of security forces that have received it is 120,000. Teachers are at 33,000. Others are at 115,000. And these are more than the healthcare workers or the frontline workers at 70,883. So for me, it's just a prolonged period of misinformation, allowing all of these things to set root. There's been, you know, we authorized it, we didn't, it's in the country, it's not. I mean, Dr. Amoth on that Tuesday last week was saying they have not left the warehouse where they are, and that same day we had prominent lawyers who were actually receiving the vaccine. And so just some of these things are what creates that hesitancy, like, do we know what's happening? You know, So for me, it's just, I would have liked to see more robust communication that would have gotten people out and that would have gotten the right information.
And right now, actually, what you say is very important, because I mean the world is now a global village, as they say. I mean, information travels fast, and right now there is a whole discussion in Europe about the AstraZeneca vaccine, and different countries are taking different measures based on the information that they're receiving, and some of that information will come here in whatever form, and it will exactly, because right now that whole question of the clotting that we've been talking about, I mean, it's a small thing. It's a rare side effect, if you like, because they were saying it is perhaps the chance is minuscule, because they were saying out of 20,000 people, they got only 79, which is
79,
which is like Linus had a percentage of what that is, but basically that is really tiny if you think about it. But then that kind of information will travel around the world, but because there isn't anyone explaining about what's really going on around here, you will find that it takes root, and then before you know it, a lot of people say, hey, I don't want that. And I think that is a big problem, because in the UK, for example, they have decided, based on whatever precautions they have, that they will give it to people who are 30 and above, because they're saying, well, 30 and below, chances of them getting adverse effects from even COVID itself is lower compared to the other people, which might be a different story here, because we've seen other things. So where is that evaluation of the local circumstances here, and based on what is being discussed out there with regard to these vaccines, then that forms part of the campaigns that we have here, because people are entitled to information, people need to make informed choices, but that can only happen if there is a proper information sort of system that has been established that helps to very quickly dispel some of those fears even before they come in, because it is easier to sell fear than to sell facts.
Truth.
And without that information that you're talking about, where clarity is shed on how like this is our vaccine plan as a country, whether it's AstraZeneca or Sputnik or whatever else that is out there, come out clearly and say, this is our plan as a government on vaccination. Because without that information, it leads to speculation. And speculation can be wild. And speculation can only be disproved by facts. There's a very nasty scenario here that is playing out, where you look at the social media and the vaccine is taking a political angle. Where were you injected? Sputnik or AstraZeneca? And then suddenly there is the ban of importation by private players. You know what this rings in my mind, unless clarity is shed into this, is the same games that we see with importation of maize during famine, importation of sugar during shortages. Because this is premeditated. It's not accidental. It's not an open tendering thing. It's a money minting affair. So are the vaccines falling in the same category as sugar, as maize? And what else do we import in fishy ways? Wheat. The government needs to come out very, very clearly and tell us, was there a problem with Sputnik, or was there a problem with who brought Sputnik to the country? Because those are things that need to be answered. And just a quick comment as well on the spat between Britain and Kenya. And we spoke of vaccine nationalism. We need to hear our side of nationalism when it comes to this vaccine. Nationalism is about putting your nation first. If Britain is putting theirs first, then we can't accuse them that much. And you know, Joe, I find it funny that we Kenyans complain about not going to Heathrow when we can't go beyond Blue Post right now. and Mai Mahiu, you can't go to Narok, you can't go to Murang'a, but you want to go to Heathrow, you get upset. It's a national crisis if Britain is saying there'll be no travelers coming from Kenya. Come on, you can't leave the 5 counties in the first place. How does it make sense that you want to leave the country?
Fly out.
I don't get it. So if we are talking vaccine nationalism, then we need to talk vaccine nationalism. We need to agree that we are in a pandemic and nations will act in their own interests first.
Yeah.
Britain will act for their citizens first before they consider ours. So for ours, we are keeping them within the 5 counties. This is invested. So let's not get upset when they are not allowed to go to Heathrow.
Let me put it this way.
And let's make that the last comment.
Yes.
Because we need to go home.
So I will be very brief. Look at it this way. The number of guys I've seen asking me, where can we get the vaccine, who are way below 58? Quite a number of them, relatives, friends. So first of all, shows you that there's a lot of interest from citizens that they want to go and get vaccinated. Why? Because at one point, there was good information, good communication, and people were convinced that the vaccine is finally good. You saw the religious leaders, the community leaders embracing the vaccine. So at least we managed as a country to deal with the first hurdle, which was that resistance, that pessimism. So now we are into optimism and interest, number one. So number two, what is required is information, openness, accountability. Once we deal with those 4 factors, then the whole vaccination process will be all right. The moment we start vaccine politics and vaccine misinformation, then we will be in trouble as a country.
I just, you sound like IMF right now. That's exactly what they're telling us to do with everything else. But, just that I would point that out. Sounds very familiar.
I did that because...
we need to end this show.
We are on borrowed time now.
Yeah, we're on borrowed time.
We need to take it home.
All right, and tonight we'll start with my angle.